Okay, so in this video, I'm going to take a 2D CAD drawing that I received from my contact at this hotel, and we're going to create a 3D ballroom drawing out of it. So I always start off with a template in Vectorworks Spotlight 2022. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to import the DWG. I'll just click OK here. As you can see, we have a pretty simple shape, so this one will be fairly easy. I always start off with adjusting my scale to 1/4 inch. Just helps align everything a little bit better. And then we're going to adjust my user origin. I'm just going to pick a random corner of the ballroom just so the 0, 0 gets aligned through everything. So you can see on this drawing we have a nice section view with heights and everything, and that's going to really help us out once we start drawing. So the first steps are we're going to build some walls. So I always make sure that my tool is set up correctly. I measured basically the size of those walls. In this case, I'm just going to start with 6 inches, and we will just start clicking through this process of building out a bunch of walls here. So this is a fairly menial and kind of repetitive task to draw the outlines, and can take a little while. This is probably one of the longest portions of this whole video, and especially if we are using very complicated 2D drawings and trying to extrapolate stuff out of here, sometimes this can take a while. But luckily this is a pretty simple drawing, and this should go fairly quickly. And I'm using the wall tool and the building kind of module. You know, this is you get some of these architectural tools with the Spotlight module. You don't get everything, but I do use this tool for walls all the time rather than trying to do extruded polygons or anything like that, because as you see, when we start dropping in doors and stuff, the functionality of being able just to snap to these walls and insert things correctly, it just makes it a whole lot easier. So just finishing up here, tracing out everything. If you kind of screw up on a corner, remember you can always hit, like I just did there, you can always hit a delete. You can hit the delete key, and that will take you back to your last point that you grabbed, so you don't have to start the whole thing over again. All right, so basically I'm taking a look at the space. We're looking at some sizing here. My next steps is I'll go ahead and assign this to a class. I usually just do building -walls. And then what we'll do is we'll start working on doing the floor, and then we'll do the ceiling and working on all the ceiling details. So like I said, this is a nice drawing because it's got this really good section view that already gives me heights and everything. Sometimes you really got to kind of extrapolate between pictures and some information that might be on the drawing to try to figure out heights and what the ceiling looks like and stuff like that. So this should go pretty quickly. So first thing is that we are going to insert doors, and there's a few doors in this project, and they're all just fairly simple swing doors. So this is not a bi-part swing. This is just a single swing. I'll go ahead and add trim to the interior. And then I will go ahead and add some hardware detailing as well to this door as well. So this makes our renders look a little bit better once we get into the 3D space. So I'm just in the door tool right now, adjusting some settings. And you can see I put the trim on the wrong side of the door, so now I'm going to go back in here and put the trim on the interior of the door. So I'm just adding the door hardware and good to go. So now that I have one and I've already messed up the, the trim there. So we'll go ahead and flip it around. You know, I notice I select these two. I go back to the trim and put it on the correct side. Interior. See? And now it's on the correct side. So I click that one, just click the flip button to get it to the correct orientation, and go ahead, hold shift, select both, and just control click, and you can go ahead and just drop these doors in really quickly. And you can see by using walls that we've now, since it's a smart object, you can just drop these in and it'll snap to it really, really quickly. And especially if you have your snapping settings set up correctly. What I didn't say earlier was that I went ahead and adjusted the height of the walls to be, just to start off with, I adjusted them to 20 feet high. And later on in the drawing, we'll go ahead and adjust them to the correct height once I start building out the ceiling details. So we're just dropping in more doors here. And the placement isn't super critical, and you know, I don't really mind if it doesn't match exactly, but this is just giving us a reference in when we get into the 3D part of it. And you can see that the wall works a little, it's a little weird with the way that the trim is on this one, but it will work just fine. So again, select both of those and then just control drag over, and you can snap it in real quick. And especially if you have the bottom layer still on, you can, the snapping will go to that layer. You can see it's actually grabbing the center of that door, which makes this copy and paste function much quicker. You can just drag it in. So you just got to make sure that you, the wall is kind of doing that, selecting in kind of the red as you do this. And that will mean, see, that one didn't work. So I have to go back in here. I'm going to zoom a little bit. And there it goes. And then sometimes it goes in the correct direction, sometimes it doesn't. And you gotta flip it. So this room's got quite a bit of doors, so we're just going around the exterior and dropping all the doors in. So now I've done all these small doors. These are just standard 3-foot man doors. Now I'm going to go ahead and do these larger doors. So again, it's just a door tool. So you drop it in here, if I can get it to grab. There it goes. So now we're going to select the buy part on the swing configuration. I think I'm looking at a very small picture of what my recording was. So it's hard for me to see what the drop-down menus are. And I adjusted it to 6 foot wide, and I just guessed, because most doors, you kind of get a feeling for it. It's either going to be 3 foot, 6 foot, or whatever. And we'll go ahead and drop these on the other side of the room, where we have some more bifold doors, or bipart doors. All right, so there we go. We got walls and doors dropped in. So you can see this goes pretty quickly once you start moving on it and get a feeling for how your snapping and everything locks in as you're moving stuff around. So I'm assigning the doors to my wall class here. So I grabbed the magic tool that selects objects of the same type, grabbed all the doors and assigned all those doors to the correct class. So now that we have got walls and doors done, now I will go and I will draw roughly, see I don't get super exact, the exterior, and you gotta do the exterior of the walls like I'm doing here. And I'm basically creating a 2D polygon at this moment. And from this 2D polygon, we're going to create then the floor and roof. See, there we go, we got a polygon. So I'm just gonna make a quick copy of that because we'll use that for the ceiling. or roof. And you can see I just extruded it -6 inches. So it will go -6 inches extrusion from your Z of 0, which then will give me a floor. And I just assigned it to a floor, and I'm going to adjust the texture. So the texture on this one, since this is going to be the floor of the ballroom, you're going to want to find a carpet texture. The standard Vectorworks carpets are kind of crappy, so I try to pick something that is pretty, vanilla, so to speak. If you're doing a very critical render of this room, you can go ahead and build textures, based off of photographs, if you have a photograph of the carpet in the room. But for this case, we're just going to keep it simple. So we just made our floor. We assigned it to a floor class. Now we're going to start to work on the ceiling. And my method on this is basically using a solid subtraction. So what we're going to do is we just extruded that polygon by 4 feet, which is way bigger than the total depth of all the architectural elements in the ceiling, but it just gives me some space to work with. I then assigned it to a ceiling class, and then I assigned it a ceiling plaster texture that will become useful when we do some render and stuff like that. So now I've got this big extrusion of the ceiling, and now basically as you're with a solid subtraction, you are kind of removing chunks of it. And we'll start basically making polygons and removing the chunks of the ceiling that way. Some people maybe build with polygons, all these individual structures, but I find that solid subtraction works the best. The only thing you have to watch out for is that solid subtractions can be kind of weighty if you have a slower machine. So once we're done with creating the ceiling architecture and you've made sure that it's correct and all the measurements are right, you can convert this to a generic solid, which won't let you edit your extrude anymore, but it will create a smaller kind of file in the end. So you can see I just adjusted the walls to 16 foot 7 inches, which is the actual lowest part of the entire ballroom ceiling. So the walls are 16 foot 7, and then on top of that, we have then the big extrusion that is going to become the ceiling. So most 2D drawings of ballrooms have your ceiling architectural kind of drawn in here in these flat polygons. So this is how I begin to create the extrudes to make those negative spaces in my overall ceiling extrude with the solid subtraction method. So this is nice because it does have that section view that tells me that those center sections of the ballroom, the big ones, those are 2 feet deep. So what I'm able to do is create those polygons, extrude it to 2 feet. I then move my bottom Z to the height of the ceiling, which is 16 foot 7. And then I go to solid subtraction. You have to select all your objects. So you select the 2D polygons you want to, your 3D polygons that you want to remove, or in this case, it's an extrude. You select what you want to remove from the ceiling first, and then you select your big overall ceiling extrude, and you go up to model, solid subtraction, and you select your first object, and then it will, as you can see here, it will remove those, in this case, those 6 extrudes from your bigger extrude. And this is you're kind of chipping away. You're just carving out chunks of your extrude. And this is kind of the process that works for me. I've never taken a class on building out these things. It just seems to work for me, and I can go quickly on it. So I think everybody figures out their own way to do this. So now that we did that first kind of chunk, I'm going through and making the higher chunk of the ceiling that needs to be removed. So it's a different polygon shape. And I'll hold down Control and click. That is a quick copy command. So I'll select them all. So now I look to see how tall this is. I measure it, 11 inches. Okay, so now I need to extrude these polygons for 11 inches. So extruded. Now I flip over to a front view probably here. Or in this case, the section view, it tells me what the bottom Z of that extrude needs to be, so I don't really need to do too much of searching back and forth. So again, with those extrudes in the right spot with their Z, I can then do a solid subtraction from my overall ceiling extrude again. So now the center section is done. In this ballroom, the center 6 sections are taller than these outer sections. And you can see that sometimes your models are not perfect. To use a single polygon and just copy and paste it everywhere, sometimes it takes a little adjustment. So these ones a little bit simpler, rather than this stepped architecture. We just have this single kind of soffit that we're pulling out of the ceiling, as you can see there. So once again, we'll get the height of the extrude that we need to do. We'll extrude that. I think it was 1 foot 3 inches, and we'll extrude those polygons. I made a copy of this just because we're going to be using those same polygons for another extrude to add in some further detailing in the ceiling after I go ahead and do this other solid subtraction. So I place the bottom Z. Select those. I sometimes bop into a quick isometric view just because it's easier to grab the ceiling object or extrude. So you can see here I got those selected. Now I hold shift and I select the ceiling extrude there. And boom. So now we've basically created the ceiling with all the various chunks taken out of the soffits. And our ballroom's beginning to look like something. So you really have to pay attention to making sure that your model of this ballroom is completely closed off from outside light. As to when you start to render it and stuff like that, you don't want light leaking in from outside. You want to be able to control the light in here. So you can see I just took those polygons. Most ballrooms have, ceiling tiles or a ceiling grid in these parts of the ceiling. So what I do is I just basically create a really thin extrude. This is only 1/16 of an inch thick, so it's not going to affect any of my heights or anything like that. So I go ahead and I just make that and I apply it to the ceiling in those areas. So I did the smaller sections, and now I'm going to go back and do the taller sections in the same method. And that'll just give us a little extra detailing of the ceiling, so it's just not all flat white plaster. So I'll select them all, do a 1/16 of an inch extrude, apply a ceiling grid texture, and of course all this stuff gets assigned to the ceiling class, building ceiling class. And it's important to keep your classes organized. Design and classes, design layer and classes organization is pretty important, especially when you're going to so I use Twinmotion to make final renders, and you can't just drop everything in the none class. So this just makes everything a lot easier. And you can see just by doing that, now we have a nice detailing of 2 foot square ceiling tiles on the top of the ceiling. So we're pretty much done with this. It's a fairly simple room, so there's not a whole lot of architecture on the walls, and I typically leave off a lot of architecture on the walls unless it could impact the show that I'm drawing. So we're moving on to the chandeliers, and they've indicated that they're just simple hemispheres. I haven't actually seen a picture of this ballroom, so I can't confirm what it actually looks like, but they're saying that this is an obstruction of a chandelier according to that section. So we are going to just take from the 3D kind of model tool set. You can just create simple hemispheres. It's just a quick click and drag. And I just flip it into a front view, drag the chandeliers into the correct position without having to worry about what the actual Z is, and then just copy click or hold down Control and click away and make a bunch of copies. These are just fairly simple chandelier geometry, so it's easy to fly on it. Some chandeliers are much more complicated, and you can do sweeps, you know, and all sorts of stuff to make the geometry look a little bit better. So now we have a room, basically. We have a floor, we have a ceiling, we have chandeliers. We'll go ahead and pop into, there we go. You can see all my ceiling, or my hemispheres, which are all chandeliers. And you may have missed the command, but I went to view and adjusted my lighting options, and I always like to click ambient occlusion when you're popping into, this is the old OpenGL render view, but popping into the, this is in 2022, they changed it to shaded. So I just click ambient occlusion. It just gives you a little bit of shadowing and just makes it look a little bit better. So right now what I'm doing is going through and just double checking all my heights to make sure I modeled it correctly. Because on the section view, they gave us a nice little, they gave us all the measurements of the ceiling, which is nice. Some ballrooms, you don't get this. So yeah, that's basically me drawing a ballroom in 3D. So now it is ready to start dropping in production elements. And I'll go ahead and save this and just drop it in my collection of convention centers. And anyways, thanks for watching the video.